Hi, I'm Kara Miller, host of the national radio show Innovation Hub, which is produced here in Boston. And I'm here today with Bob Schieffer, a former host of CBS Evening News, longtime host of Face the Nation, covered politics for more than 40 years. And you're here today to talk at the Shorenstein Center on Media, Politics, and Policy to talk about your new book, Overload, Finding the Truth in Today's Deluge of News. So let's talk about some of the news that I think is on people's minds right now. If you kind of take 10 steps back or 100 steps back, what do you make of what you're seeing? Just sort of real big picture.
Well, we've never had anything like this. As I write in the book, we've never had an election like the one that we just had, and it has been followed by a presidency unlike anything that I have ever seen. During this campaign, I said so many times on television, I've never seen anything like this, that it became a drinking game amongst our younger colleagues at CBS, but I don't think anybody has seen anything quite like we saw in that campaign. The dialogue became more like a thread on a blog post than like the political discourse we're used to. I mean, you know, somebody posts something on a blog and then somebody else says, oh, you're an idiot. And then the next person says, no, you're the idiot. And then you're a blank, blank idiot. And we just sort of slide from the inane to the profane. And I'm not sure how much the store of knowledge was advanced.
Almost feels like we are splitting into, you know, this kind of third party, or that the Republican Party is splintering in a way I don't know that they ever anticipated during the campaign. We saw Steve Bannon saying, we're going to primary everybody except Ted Cruz, who's up in the Senate. A Republican. I mean, he's a Republican against the Republicans. Again, looking back, do you ever feel like there was a time when a party turned so much in on itself or felt like it was going into two completely different directions?
Well, I guess we'd have to think back to 1968. I was at the Democratic Convention there when it seemed like the center simply was not going to hold. I mean, I felt during those days that maybe the whole thing was coming apart. We got through that, and I guess maybe that's the good news we all have to remember. We've been through tough times before, but I got to tell you, I'm wondering if both the Republican and the Democratic parties are coming apart. I don't think anybody in the Republican establishment thought that Donald Trump was going to get the nomination. And then on the other side, and I preface this by saying I like Senator Clinton. I thought she was an excellent senator. I was covering Capitol Hill. But how is it that the Democratic Party in 2016 managed to come up with only one candidate who had a national following, and her main competition came from someone who wasn't even a Democrat, who called himself, he said at one point, I'm not a capitalist. I've never heard anybody in American politics say that, and yet he did, and he was their strongest competition. So I think both parties are probably as weak as they have ever been in history. And I don't know what that portends.
So let me challenge you on one thing. Now, it was a few months ago, but I talked to Brian Lamb several months ago, who founded C-SPAN, still very much a presence there. And I asked him about Donald Trump and does he feel different to him? I mean, and he said, you know, he is different. Trump is different from anybody I've ever seen. But I had never seen anything like what happened around the Vietnam War with LBJ. I never saw a president forced from office like Nixon. I never saw a president impeached in a sex scandal like, you know, President Clinton. So he said, he is different, but everybody I've seen, almost everybody I've seen, is different from everybody I've ever seen. Do you think there's any truth to that, or it's gone way beyond that for you?
No, I think that's I'd never kind of put it together in that way, but all of what he says is true.
Right.
Having said that, I mean, let me just point out something to you. When we look back at the campaign in 2016, I mean, it was a campaign more about attitude than it was about issues. Issues never came up.
So let's talk about, you know, in your book, Overload, you talk a lot about media. We just touched on it. Let's talk about that issue of, like, I mean, there's probably no reversing the fact that the Boston Globe and the Dallas Morning News and the Cleveland Plain Dealer, I mean, they're not going to be probably ever the powerhouses that they once were. There's, you know, I've talked to people who used to cover state houses, and they would say that the galleries, the press galleries, used to be full, and there's like 2 people in them. I wonder about a couple of things. One is, you know, what you were saying about the impact on sort of everyday people, and what is the impact when an institution like that gets shriveled. And the other thing is, I worry about corruption or sort of malfeasance at the state level, because that is the farm team for national politics. I mean, where do senators come from? Where do representatives come from? Often they were big deals in their states.
Exactly. And unless we find some entity to do what we've always expected from local newspapers, and that is to keep an eye on the local government, we'll have corruption in this country at levels that we have never experienced before, let alone what it says about those who are coming up through the system and running for office. But here's the problem right now. We have made running for office so odious. It's so money driven that our best and brightest are not running for office. They're turning away. And when I was writing this book, I ran across a very interesting statistic. In 1975, and this was in the wake of Watergate, by that time 32 people had been given prison sentences and gone to jail, or had paid substantial fines for campaign finance law violations. Today, every single thing they went to jail for is legal. We're not going forward, we're going backward. And if we don't get a handle on it, it's going to destroy our politics altogether. They've been badly damaged, our politics, but we're still limping along. But we got to find a way to change this.
So a final question for you. Not that any prediction is possible in this climate, but give me a sense. You see a lot of things happening politically. As we were talking about, there seems to be a splintering of the Republican Party. Maybe there's also one on the Democratic side. It's just happening in a more quiet, less reality show kind of way. Look ahead a little bit. Where do you think we are in a year or two?
You know, Glenn Thrush, who's a great reporter for the New York Times, he and Maggie Haberman both came up through the New York tabloids, and he gave me a very interesting insight into trying to understand where Trump's going. He said, we talk about the 24-hour news cycle, but he said in his mind it's a 1-hour news cycle. And he said what he does in the first 15 minutes will have nothing to do with what may happen in the next 15 minutes, and probably had nothing to do with what happened in the previous 15 minutes. So everything is a surprise. One would hope that things could kind of settle down here and we could kind of take a deep breath. But right now, I don't see any indication that that's going to happen. So I'm going to have to weasel out on giving you an answer. I have no idea what comes next. But
okay.
Hang on to your hat, because it's going to be a bumpy ride.
I will. Bob Schieffer is the former anchor of the CBS Evening News, longtime anchor of Face the Nation. Thank you so much. This was really fun.
It was great. I
Thanks.
enjoyed it.